What is up, hooligans? Happy freedom. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Hooligans, where we try to make the news suck a little less. I appreciate all of you guys being here. If you have a like button, please hit that like button. More likes, more hooligans. The press briefing's going on right now, but it's just Captain Hot Dog Fingers out there, you know, flashing his hands all over the screen, doing crab hands and stuff, which I don't know why he does that. We're going to read through the schedule really quick, and then we'll go ahead and throw his hot dog finger ass on the screen. So obviously we're starting off with a press briefing, or whatever's left of it. They haven't called on Jackie yet. Peter's not there, and Hot Dog Fingers never has anything to say about America, so got you caught up on that. Then we will be starting with a video titled "No Secret, Sheila Jackson Lee is the worst boss on Capitol Hill." They got a recording of her talking crazy to her staff, but you wouldn't expect anything less from a person like that. Then we have a video titled "Off-Duty Pilot Tries to Cut Alaska Airline Engines." I don't know if it was just random act of radicalism or what it was. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but we'll be covering that. Then we have a video titled "Bidenomics Delivered a Disaster for Every American." We already know that, but it's just nice to hear somebody else say what we're all experiencing. And then we'll be wrapping. Oh no, then we have a video titled "Human Trafficking Arrests Surge in Illinois County." They're saying that it's all over. Human trafficking is getting worse, which is terrible. Then we'll be wrapping things up with a video titled "Former Trump Attorney Takes Plea Deal in Georgia Election Case." I don't know how to feel about all that. Everybody except for Trump is taking plea deals, and I worry about that. Because I want to see everybody put forth that evidence. That's what I want to see. Hopefully that's what Trump does. We'll see when we get there, though. We're going to get over to this press briefing. Let me get this link pulled up really quick. All right, there we go. So I was late today, and I didn't get the Halloween shirts up yet because my phone is taking a shit. I was telling you guys that yesterday. The power button's breaking and the volume button is breaking, and it's causing my phone to go in and out of security mode and boot loop and have all these problems. I can't get it to stay stable long enough to upload the image to be able to make the Halloween shirts, and it's shutting off all my alarms. I've missed 3 alarms today, so my schedule is pretty much useless now because it can't notify me. If you guys would like to contribute to that, you know where the links are and whatnot. I don't, it sucks. I run the whole live like from my phone except for this part of it, and it's really screwing everything up, and I just wanted to mention that. Anyways, I lost my brain. I will drop the links in the chat for you guys to go check out some free The Orange Eagle merch. We got t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, zipper hoodies, pullover hoodies, shirts for boobies, shirts with if you don't have boobies. We got all that kind of stuff. I will, like I said, drop the link in the chat so you guys can check it out. If that's not your style, you can always go with the Screaming Goat. Everybody loves the Screaming Goat. Again, comes in a ton of different items, and I got brand new coffee mugs for all the designs. Go check it out in the merch store. I'll drop the link while we're hearing lies from the podium.
This is war. It is combat. It is bloody. It is ugly, and it's going to be messy. And innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that that wasn't going to happen, but it is going to happen, and that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it dismissible. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to still express concerns about that and do everything we can to help the Israelis do everything they can to minimize it. But that's unfortunately the nature of conflict.
Thank you, Admiral. So going off your earlier exchange with Peter, to be clear, the U.S. cannot say if they're confident that Israel has a clear and achievable military plan?
That is a question for the Israeli Defense Forces.
You've said you've asked them tough questions, but has the U.S. set or discussed any possible red lines?
No.
And following on that, Secretary of State Antony Blinken had just said humanitarian pauses must be considered to protect civilians in Gaza. Can you expand on that?
Can I expand on, I'm sorry.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said humanitarian pauses must be considered to protect civilians in Gaza.
We want, as I said from the beginning, we want to see all measure of protection for civilians, and pauses in operation is a tool and a tactic that can do that for temporary periods of time.
So does that mean
That is not the same as saying a ceasefire. Again, right now, we believe a ceasefire benefits Hamas, a general ceasefire.
And just to follow up on that, so could you clarify just a little bit how you would define the difference between a humanitarian pause?
I mean, I think it's really, it's a question of duration and scope and size and that kind of thing.
Got it, okay. And then you said yesterday, when asked about kind of what the future of Gaza might look like, that that's something that the Israelis are going to need to figure out subsequently.
And I think that they're exploring those questions about what governance in Gaza looks like long term. I just don't think that, and understandably, their focus is much more on the here and now and the operations.
And does the U.S. have a view about the legality of a reoccupation of Gaza by Israel, and whether that's a temporary thing or a more permanent thing?
I don't believe we've taken a position on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you believe that the current level of bombardment allows for the extraction or transfer of hostages?
Difficult to answer the question, given that we're not completely sure about the location of each and every hostage. And we're working to get more granularity on that. And we have seen now, just yesterday, another 2 got out. Now, obviously, that's just a tiny fraction of the pool that we think Hamas is holding. But we think the effort to continue to negotiate for the release of additional hostages is worth the effort. Obviously, we've got 4 now families who are going to get reunited. That's a good thing. And we think that work needs to continue.
If a pause rather than a ceasefire is what's necessary, how long do you think is reasonable to expect some of that information to be obtained?
I couldn't begin to answer that question right now.
And then Israeli officials have told CNN that they do not support any transfer of fuel into Gaza, which Hamas has said is required for any sort of deal to release hostages. Does the U.S. support that position?
Separate and distinct from the hostage situation and what we're doing to try to get them out. I want to be careful that I'm not talking about the specifics of the conversations that are going into getting these people out, lest I say something that makes it harder to do it in the future. Put that aside for a second. We have said, continue to say, that fuel is an important commodity for life and sustainment in Gaza for the Palestinian people that are still there. And we know that fuel is a precious commodity that's running out, and you need it for generators in hospitals. You need it to run the desalination pumps so that you can drink fresh water and not seawater. All of that is important. And so we're going to continue to work with partners in the region. We're going to continue to push for fuel to get in. Now, look, that said, I said this again yesterday, we certainly understand Israeli concerns about the possibility for Hamas to abscond with fuel and use it for their own purposes and not allow it to be used in hospitals and desalination plants. We understand that. That is a legitimate concern, no question about it, which is why, again, Ambassador Satterfield is on the ground working this so hard. There's a balance here that has to be achieved. Obviously, we haven't achieved it yet, but we still believe, just in general, that fuel needs to be able to get into the people of Gaza.
Katie.
Oh, thanks. Of the 10 that are presumed, missing or hostages, can you tell us whether or not all 10 are presumed to be hostages, or are some still missing? What's the percentage?
We don't know. They're not accounted for. Some could be hostages. Some could unfortunately be dead. We don't know. That's why they're still in the unaccounted for category.
And then just to pivot back, because lines get blurred on everything, the Australian Prime Minister has a meeting with President Xi of China scheduled for next month. So I'm just wondering, how much is countering China expected to come up tomorrow? And also, just what is the position on having such an important ally that needs to do business, as we also do, with China?
Oh, I think we fully support and understand that the Prime Minister wants to meet with President Xi and travel to Beijing. We have traveled to Beijing, 3 cabinet secretaries and Special Envoy Kerry. Of course, Jake Sullivan's going to be having, and the Secretary of State's going to be having meetings later this week with their Foreign Minister, Wang Yi. So conversations with the Chinese and keeping the lines of communication open is really important. The president has said that many, many times. And of course, Australia is, their relationship with China is incredibly important to them as well to manage it. Now, to your first question, there's no question in my mind that the challenges and the opportunities in relations with the PRC will be on the agenda tomorrow. No question about that.
Thank you. John, does the administration agree with the UN Secretary General's statement today that the Hamas attacks, quote, did not happen in a vacuum?
I don't know what he meant by that, so I'm not. I
can read you
I'm not sure. I didn't see the comments, and I'm not sure what the context is.
He said that it's important to recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They've seen their land steadily devoured by settlements, plagued by violence. It goes on. That statement infuriated a lot of Israelis. I want to know if the administration disagrees with what he said.
The president has spoken very clearly, and I think very forcefully, on who's to blame here for October 7th. It's Hamas. It's not the Israelis. It's not the innocent Israeli people that were slaughtered going to a music festival. It was Hamas. They planned this thing for many months, maybe even as long as a year. Hamas is to blame. Hamas is to blame.
On that note, is the assessment still the same that Iran did not directly play a role in this attack? Because you had Senator Blumenthal saying over the weekend.
I never said that Iran did not play a role. What we've said, and there's been no change, what we said, Jackie, is Iran is certainly complicit here. Without them, there is no Hamas. Without them, there's no Hezbollah. Without them, there's no militia groups firing rockets at our troops in Iraq.
These guys don't like hummus.
Yesterday up here, we recognize Iran's monitoring all these events, and in some cases, they're encouraging some of these attacks. No question about it. Now, you talk about October 7th. We still haven't seen any direct, specific intelligence that says they were witting or participating or directing the attacks of October 7th. But as I said, broadly complicit, no question about that. And I'm sure that our Israeli counterparts will, in due time, take a harder look at the intelligence picture and what might have been missed, what gaps there were, but I'll let them speak to that.
Can you just speak to the shift in language we heard yesterday out of the Pentagon? Last week no one would confirm on the record that these attacks were coming from Iranian proxy groups, but then Brigadier General Pat Ryder said the U.S. holds Iran responsible. Is the U.S. taking this as a signal that Iran is in fact trying to widen the war?
We see that they are backing these groups, no question about it.
You guys think Jackie's pregnant? She seems like she's been changing her style up a little bit. She's kind of got that softness to her face. I'm wondering.
State or actor is preparing or imminently to escalate this conflict, but we're watching this very, very closely. And again, I want to be clear here. Nobody's turning a blind eye.
It's weird that everybody struggles so hard being clear at that podium. They have to announce it over and over again every day.
Their support for terrorists throughout the region. We have addressed that through additional sanctions. We have addressed it through additional military force posture. We're obviously going to do what we have to do to protect ourselves and our troops. Nobody's at all turning away from that threat or their historic and sustained support for these terrorist groups.
Thanks. John, just a follow-up to what Peter asked earlier. I like two questions, but one to drill down. I assume when the president said aid isn't getting fast enough to Gaza, that he's not critiquing our efforts to get it there. So, and without hanging a hook on who's responsible, is he saying that more can be done from our end? Is there more that can be done to get the aid to them?
I think he was referring to actors in the region.
And then the second question is, it's for many years, you're going to meet with the Australian government, and they have supported the release of Julian Assange. Now, we haven't done so saying there were national security reasons, but for the reasons that he has been charged are basically the same efforts that many reporters use. So is there any change of heart in this administration's efforts to free Julian Assange?
I won't be able to talk about extradition matters, Brian, and as you know, this is something. Fair question, but this is something the Justice Department is handling, and I think it's better if you go to them on that.
We have to wrap it up. Okay, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Admiral. So you've talked in here about contingency plans for this conflict potentially escalating, even though the administration wants to prevent that. So is the U.S. military really planning for possible evacuation of hundreds of Americans from the Middle East?
No, they don't evacuate Americans. They just leave them behind. You ain't figured this out yet?
Right before you execute. What we're talking about here is just
Look at East Palestine. Look at how Hawaii went. Look how Afghanistan went. You even got to ask that?
evacuate Americans from the region. Other than what we're doing in Israel, providing charter flights, there's no active efforts. And we're not parking ships off the coast and getting ready to send Marines in to get people out of. You pick the place over there. That's not happening right now. But what was reported in the press is nothing more than prudent contingency planning. And as I said at the outset, given everything that's been going on the last 2 weeks, it would be irresponsible if we weren't taking pen to paper and taking a look at what that might look like. But there's been no orders given, nobody prepositioned to do it, no moving in that direction. But if it should get to that, my goodness, you'd want to make sure we were ready to do it and do it like that.
And if I could just quick follow-up on the longer it takes for the House to agree on a speaker, how concerned is the president that the administration is going to be able to get the necessary aid to Israel as well as humanitarian aid?
It's a concern. As I said earlier, we've got appropriations to support Ukraine and Israel for a bit longer. Now, how long is a bit's going to depend on the pace and the scale of these combat operations in both countries. But yeah, we wouldn't have put a supplemental request in, which, oh, by the way, says right in the first line, it's an urgent request. We wouldn't say it wasn't urgent if it wasn't urgent. We want them to act as quickly as possible.
Okay.
John, I wonder if we've heard numbers of several hundred Americans who are in Gaza, up to 600. Do you have a more specific number of the actual number of Americans who are in Gaza right now?
State Department is a better place to go for that.
So we're
Several hundred I know is accurate. I wish I could be more detailed than that, but you really got to go to state. They would have a better count probably than I would.
And then in the prudent planning process, I mean, for these several hundred Americans who are in Gaza right now, if it's in a prudent planning stage,
Please don't mix up the two. What the question I was getting was on the Washington Post report about regional evacuation planning. We are actively trying to get Americans out of Gaza. Ambassador Satterfield was appointed for that purpose, well, also to get humanitarian assistance in, and we're doing that. But we know there's Americans in there. We know they want to get out. We're working very hard to find safe passage for them. That is different than a non-combatant evacuation operation. That's safe passage out of a war zone.
is there a current, advice, I guess, for folks who are kind of trying to gather near the Rafah crossing in case that is where they would evacuate? Is it advisable for Americans in Gaza right now to be in a certain location?
I got this question yesterday, and I really should refer you to the State Department. They manage and handle our communication with American citizens overseas, and I think it's better for that question to be posed to them.
Matt, you have the last question.
Thank you. John, I wanted to make sure that I understood the idea of a ceasefire versus a humanitarian pause. You guys clearly are opposed to a ceasefire, thinking that would be a victory for Hamas. But on the humanitarian pause, is it something that the U.S. is actively pursuing or calling for that to be the case?
Well, you heard the Secretary of State talk about the need to look at that, to consider the possibility of a humanitarian pause, to allow aid to get in and get in unfettered, and to allow for the safe movement of people out. But again, there's a lot that goes into that, Matt. We got the Rafah crossing's open on the way in. It's not open on the way out. There's a lot of spade work in diplomacy to get that to happen.
So you're not calling for it at this point. You're saying it should be an option.
I think it's, again, I would refer you back to what Secretary Blinken said, but it's certainly something that ought to be considered for the purpose of humanitarian assistance.
Okay. And then one last thing on the 10 Americans that are unaccounted for. Is there any confirmation that some number of those are currently being held hostage, or is it completely that the U.S. has no idea where those people are?
No, the fact that they're unaccounted for means we truly don't know. We know, again, as I said, a handful, less than 10.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that $20 donation over on Rumble. I really appreciate you, Sam. Thank you. You're awesome.
sometimes it's really bad news. Sometimes it's not. So that number fluctuates. It hasn't fluctuated.
Holy crap, Kirby. It's driving me nuts.
But what I can tell you is we're working real hard to try to solve those mysteries, and so that the number's zero, and at least families know, at least they have information, and we're working hard on that. All right, thank you. Thanks, Corinne. Sorry I was late.
See?
It's my fault.
That's twice now.
Noted for the record.
Yes, noted for the record, indeed. All right, Sung Ming.
Thanks, Corinne. A couple topics. On the expanding UAW strike, obviously you had 5,000 workers walk off the plant in Texas today. The strike is in the 6th week, and you had Ford laying off workers in Michigan and Ohio. And I'm wondering how concerned the White House is right now that you can get a resolution that's in a timely enough fashion that you avoid significant economic damage.
So obviously, we're monitoring all of this, everything that you just laid out very closely. Yesterday, I was asked about Gene Sperling and also Acting Secretary Sue, who have been obviously playing point from this administration in helping in any way possible. Not part of the negotiation, but certainly helping communicate with the parties, both UAW and the Big Three. Look, the president continues to believe that collective bargaining is incredibly important. The options that are under collective bargaining, UAW has the right to kind of think through those options. And so we believe that if everyone comes together in good faith, that there could be a win-win agreement. And so we're going to let them have those negotiations, continue to have those conversations. Obviously, everything that you laid out, we're going to monitor very closely. I don't have anything beyond that.
And on the supplemental packages, obviously you set up the national security focus up last week. We have reporting, others have reported as well, that there are plans to send up a domestic focus supplemental. And I'm wondering if you could talk through kind of the idea of sending it in 2 different packages, especially because you have people like Bernie Sanders saying Congress can't pass just tens of billions for priorities abroad without addressing the priorities at home. So why did the White House choose to do it in separate packages?
I mean, look, in Director Young's letter, she said that there would be a domestic supplemental as well. It's coming this week. So certainly it's going to lay out the president's priorities as it relates to disaster relief, as it relates to child care. And so that's coming. That is forthcoming. We did certainly, as you heard from the Admiral, with the supplemental that we released last week, the foreign one, the international one, it said urgent on it in the first line, right? Because we believed it was incredibly important as we see the war in Ukraine, as we see what's happening with Israel and Hamas. We wanted to make sure that certainly that we got that out there as soon as possible. But the domestic one is coming this week. That's what Director Young said in her letter that you all, I'm sure you all saw, that there's going to be an additional request on the domestic front, and those are going to be priorities and just as important, but also priorities for the president as well. That is critical to domestic push or platform that he has.
Thanks, Green. We've heard from Senate Republicans that humanitarian aid to Gaza is an issue for them in the aid package. Are there any modifications to the aid package that would be red lines for the White House?
I'm not going to get into any hypotheticals or any red lines. We believe there's no reason for Congress shouldn't pass or support this. We believe this is a national security priority, right? Which includes, as you know, critical aid to Ukraine as well, not just aid to what's happening to Israel with what's happening in the region. But we also believe there is strong bipartisan support. We've heard it from Mitch McConnell. We've heard it from McCall, right? Chairman McCall. We heard it from Chairman Turner. So we believe there is actually strong bipartisan support for this supplemental package that was introduced by the president last week. And we believe that there's no reason at all that Congress can't get it through.
Does the president have any reaction to the reporting that Congressman Dean Phillips is going to be seeking the Democratic presidential nomination?
I'm going to be careful from here. I'm not going to speak to electoral politics, upcoming electoral politics 2024. If one thing I would say outside of that is we appreciate the congressman almost 100% support of this president as he's moved forward with some really important key legislative priorities for the American people. I just don't have anything to share on that on the 2024 from here. Go ahead, Kim.
Republicans have selected Tom Emmer as their speaker nominee. I know you've said very often that the White House does not have a vote in this.
Ad nauseam, I'm sure.
You're not involved in this process, but Emmer has been one of the more supportive Republicans for Ukraine aid across the board. Do you see that as a positive signal?
I'm just not going to speak to their process. I'm sure there's more steps to go, right, before we get to the end here. I think it's important and critical that the Republicans in the conference get their act together, get their business in order, and figure out who's going to lead not just the conference, obviously be, since they have the majority in the House, have a speaker for the House. Just not going to get into it. I have said just moments ago, we have seen bipartisan support for the supplemental package that the president announced last week, that we spoke to last week, and so we believe that Congress should move forward with that. As it relates to their process and finding a speaker, that is up to them. We do not, as the president has said himself, just quoting him, we do not have a vote in that space. Yeah, Brian.
Just a follow-up, I know you don't want to talk about their process, but once the House picks a speaker, your process, considering the global situation, is this administration considered asking the House Speaker to speak before a joint session of Congress, or would you consider having them over to members of the GOP and the Democratic leadership in Congress over to the White House to talk about the situation, since you're asking for additional funds?
Look, there are conversations that have been happening and will continue from this administration to folks on the Capitol. That has been happening via the director of OMB. That's been happening with the Legislative Affairs Office. Those conversations with congressional members have been ongoing as it relates to making sure we get this additional funding. And so that hasn't stopped. That's going to continue. We're going to continue to make sure that we talk to folks, whether in the Senate or in the House, about the critical importance about getting this aid, especially as we talk about our national security. And now we're going to announce pretty soon the domestic piece of this as well. So those conversations continue. That's never stopped, and they will certainly move forward with that, regardless of what happens.
But will the president become personally involved? I mean, the situation has been outlined here in the White House is how dire it is in the Middle East and how dire the situation is in Ukraine. So in order to sell it or in order to make the deal, is the president willing to do it himself to talk to?
We believe we have bipartisan support. We believe we have bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate to get this done. I just mentioned a couple of I mentioned Chairman McCall, I mentioned Mitch McConnell. They've been very supportive of getting this moving forward. So we believe the bipartisan support is there, and there's no reason for Congress not to move forward. Go ahead, Karen.
The president spoke with the families of unaccounted Americans 11 days ago. Are there any plans for him to have another conversation with those families? And if not him, can you talk about the contact between senior White House officials and those families right now? We're told that there has been daily communication.
I don't have anything to read out to you on any further conversations, so just don't have anything to share at this time on anything that's going to moving forward on as it relates to the president speaking again to those families.
And how about people in the White House? Like, who is talking?
I just don't have specifics. Obviously, we have had connection and conversations with them. I just don't have the specifics on who is talking to the families. Okay, Justin.
Thanks, Karine. We're only a couple of weeks away from government funding also running out again. At this point, do you guys have a preferred strategy for how you'd like to see the government funding bill, the two supplemental requests go through? Do you want to see one sort of collective piece of legislation, or?
So I don't have a direct process on that. But certainly, we want to see both of them get through, both the domestic supplemental, which we're going to announce this week, and obviously the urgent supplemental as it relates to our national security that we announced last week. Certainly, we think Congress should move forward with both of them. They should move forward on getting those passed. As I mentioned, as it relates to the national security request that we made with Ukraine and also Israel, we've seen bipartisan support. We don't believe there should not be a reason for Congress to move forward with that. Once we get the domestic supplemental request out there, obviously we'll have conversations as we are now, continue to have conversations with members of Congress to talk about that piece as well. But we want to see both of them move forward. They're both critical. They're both important. If you think about the domestic, we're talking about child care, right? We're talking about disaster relief fund, all incredibly important to the American people.
When the negotiations were going on before, you guys reference pretty frequently the deal that former Speaker McCarthy, and the president had out of the debt ceiling talks.
Yeah.
Given the state of Republican leadership right now, do you guys still see that framework as sort of operative, or do you think we'll be starting sort of from square one when they go into the negotiations?
So, look, I'm not going to get certainly into hypotheticals from here, how the process is going to go. If we go back to the budget agreement a couple of months ago, it was something that, again, House Republicans, 2/3 of them voted for it. It got bipartisan support. It was something that American people wanted to see, both Republicans and Democrats coming together and delivering for the American people. And so that was incredibly important to the president. We believe that they needed to stick to the deal that they voted on. The president signed that bill, and now we're at a point where we're talking about the supplemental budget, right? Which is something that is common. It is not unusual for the administration to ask for a supplemental request.
Yeah. You said that in addition to sort of disaster relief, it might include childcare and other priorities, and so I'm wondering if this may push beyond the sort of deficit cuts that you had agreed to as part of that deal.
No, I understand the question. Look, supplementals are, as you know, not unusual to ask. And these are domestic priorities that the president thinks are incredibly important, that the American people need and want to see. If you think about child care, if you think about the American Rescue Plan, how important it was to have, for example, the CTC and what the difference that made to communities across the country. And so this is something that's been part of the president's platform for some time. And so he's gonna put out his domestic supplemental in the next day or two. He'll lay that out for Congress, and we'll continue to have those conversations. But he thinks the reason he's asking for it because he actually believes it's very important, and it's not unusual for the administration to ask for a supplemental budget. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I want to ask you about current energy prices and Iran, if I could. So Iran makes 70% of its revenue from oil. It's doubled that oil output since 2019, adding $40 billion to revenues. So are the president's current energy policies giving Iran enough money to fund terror groups? Because the price of oil has gone up under this president. The former President Trump, the average price of Brent oil was $58. Under this president, it's $83 a barrel. So the price of oil is more. Is that giving Iran enough money to fund these terror groups in the Middle East?
I mean, I wholeheartedly disagree that our actions are giving. Is that what you're saying? Can you say that again?
The current energy policies in the U.S.
From our energy policies.
Yeah, seeing the price of oil go up because when you restrict supply here in the United States, it's forcing to get the global supply from somewhere else. OPEC is cutting prices of oil, so the price of oil goes up.
Yeah, and we're not part of OPEC, as you know.
Right.
And so they're going to make their decisions on whatever they decide. We are not a member of OPEC.
But the administration has decided to regulate the oil industry here in the U.S. and restrict investment, future investment in the oil supply in the U.S. And so as the price of oil goes up, is that giving Iran enough money to fund these terror groups?
It seems to be a big jump. And so certainly I'm not going to speak into...
Sounds like he's right on the money and she don't have a way to spin it.
So certainly I'm not going to weigh into this. I'm just not going to weigh into a hypothetical here. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you. Just to quickly follow up on something that John Kirby said about the Gaza Health Ministry, because I think this would be helpful for Americans who are watching this conflict from afar. Does the administration see the Gaza Health Ministry at an all credible source of information concerning the crisis on the ground in Gaza?
He literally just spoke to this, but he just answered this question.
He said that they were associated with Hamas, but does the administration think that they are at all credible?
He literally just spoke to this and answered it. I don't have anything else additional to say. He just said we should question, right? He actually answered the question. I don't have anything else to say.
Thank you.
She said he actually answered it because it's so rare.
Visit of the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is coming to D.C. For a 3-day visit. So besides the potential meeting between President Xi and President Biden at this APEC summit, is China's stance on Israel and Ukraine on the agenda? And also, in the wake of those attacks in Europe and Middle East, I'm assuming U.S. doesn't want to see any other conflicts happen in Asia. So in this visit, will U.S. reiterate to Wang Yi that United States will not stand aside if China attacks Taiwan?
So a couple of things just to say at the top. As you know, Wang Yi is going to be meeting with Secretary Blinken and also our National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and so it's going to happen. He's going to be in town on Friday, and so that's when those meetings are going to occur. This is about engaging face to face. You hear us talk about all the time how diplomacy, face to face diplomacy, especially as it relates to foreign policy, is incredibly important. So we're going to raise the challenging issues, obviously. We're going to address misperceptions and also miscommunications and explore working with PRC where our interests intersect. That is something that we have said certainly from the beginning of this administration. And so our strategy toward PRC has been consistent here, and our assessment of the challenges that we have with PRC that poses has not changed. And we have been very clear. We want to see competition. That's what we want to see with PRC, competition. And so we seek to manage that competition in a responsible way. And so again, you're going to see a diplomatic engagement, a face-to-face engagement with the Secretary and our National Security Advisor. We think it's important to have those conversations. You heard the Admiral, how there's been 3 secretaries that have already gone to Beijing, had those face-to-face diplomatic conversations. Now Wang Yi is going to be here on Friday, and so we're going to continue those we believe, important discussions.
Is Israel and Ukraine going to be on there?
I'm not going to get ahead of what's on the agenda, but obviously we're going to talk about challenges, ways to work together that better our interest, obviously, and we're going to continue the engagement that we've had at various levels at the PRC.
Question on the global south. So of course he highlights UN's call for Israel to follow the law of the war in effort to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. But we also seen from the Arab world and global south, and we're seeing protests in Indonesia, in Malaysia, against United States support to Israel, and which those are important allies in Indo-Pacific and ASEAN. Is United States concerned about the strategy right now might alienate those allies that might be important in the Pacific?
Yeah, we have important allies and partners across the globe, and we certainly, those relationships are very important. But the president and this administration has been very clear in our support for Israel and how we want to make sure that they are able to deal with a terrorist organization like Hamas and to protect their people, right? We have been very clear and make sure that humanitarian aid, as you've heard us say over and over again, gets into Gaza. And so that's going to be our focus. We have an ambassador on the ground who's focusing on that, making sure that we do everything that we can to get the hostages out. So that is our priority right now, and that's going to be our focus. Go ahead.
Thanks. On the House Speaker race, the odds are whoever Republicans end up electing, 1 is not going to have much of a history with the president, and 2 is not going to have done much in terms of major negotiations over legislation. So I wonder if that heightens any level of concern the White House has about being able to get these priorities done by the end of the year, being able to kind of have that familiarity in those conversations.
So look, I'll say a couple of things there. Look, we believe it is important to get the work done on behalf of the American people. It is important. It is important to have a functioning House, which is right now is not functioning because they cannot figure out who is going to lead, they meaning the House Republicans, who's going to be the leader of their conference, who's going to be the Speaker of the House, and that's a problem. We see that as a problem. But we're going to continue to do everything once they decide, and we hope they do it very quickly because we have a lot of business to get done. Just talked about 2 supplementals, one that we had, the national security one that we announced last week, and a domestic one that we're going to announce this week, obviously, and to make sure the government stays open. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and we hope that they get their their priorities in order, they get themselves in order, so that we can get this done on behalf of the American people. We are willing to work with them in a bipartisan way to get things done. We see bipartisan support for the national security supplemental. That's important. And then we're going to be announcing our domestic supplemental. Look, we think it's important that the House Republicans get their affairs in order so that we can continue to deliver for the American people. Yeah.
In the interim, in an urgent situation, in an emergency situation, who does the White House consider the leader of the Republican conference in the House?
Look, right now, as you know, there's the Speaker Pro Tem, obviously, right? So he is, he's by default is there. But I mean, look, I mean, we say this. I know we say this ad nauseum. We were joking around with Kayla. Oh, I think it was Kayla. I can't remember on this. It is for them to fix, right? It is for them to decide who is going to be the speaker. Them meeting the House Republicans. They gotta get to work here. The American people is counting on us, and the president is doing his job. He's doing his job domestically and as commander-in-chief. We have to see House Republicans do their job as well. Thanks, everybody. See you Thursday.
Thank you.
Prostitute.
Well, hooligans, that was the lies from the podium. Nothing special. I swear, I miss Jen Balsacki. At least she made us laugh every day, unintentionally. KJP, she's just sad. She's just sad looking like a defeated Oscar the Grouch. Tis what it is. Just a second here. Finish what I was typing, then we're gonna move on to this first video here. If you guys have been having trouble logging into the website, 1, if you have trouble on the website, write me, otherwise I can't fix it. 2, I have made some changes, so you should be able to access the website. If you're having issues having to log in over and over, that should be fixed right now. Alright, so we're going to start in this first video titled, No Secret Sheila Jackson Lee is the Worst Boss on Capitol Hill. She's that older, dark-skinned lady who has like fake hair piled on her head, like she's gonna summon snakes or whatever, you know, charm some snakes. I bet she is a snake charmer, I'm sure. Look at this face. Who doesn't want their snake charmed by that person? Anyways, talking out of the side of her neck to her staff, and it seems like the whole, like all blue team just shits on their staff. I don't know, people who are public servants I don't think should be behaving that way, but that's my opinion. Let's get this started. First, we need a couple of these. I can still hear KJP in my head and Captain Hot Dog Fingers, and they're all saying a whole bunch of nothing. It's white noise like Charlie Brown. Just gotta clear it out. Clear it out a bit. Let's get it started now.
Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee allegedly going on an explicit rant against members of her own staff. And the whole thing was all caught on tape. Fox hasn't been able to independently verify, but we have it on tape. Let's listen.
Both of y'all are assholes. It's the worst I could have ever had put together. Two goddamn children. Idiots. Serve no goddamn purpose. Ain't managing nobody. Nobody's respecting them. Nobody gives a about what you're doing. And you ain't doing.
We reached out to the Congresswoman for a statement, but didn't hear back. However, her mayoral campaign is calling it, quote, a low-handed political tactic meant to discredit a thriving mayoral campaign and distract voters ahead of the early voting period. Discussion. Data.
We're not going to hear those idiots discuss it. I just wanted to cover the story and talk about it ourselves. I don't know. She's talking all crazy, but if one of those people would have slapped the shit out of her, then, you know, then it would have been an act of racism or something stupid like that. She never has anything good to say. Anytime I've ever seen that person, anytime we've ever covered anything with her, live or otherwise, it's always been like, who's that piece of shit? Always. She reminds me of April in the White House press briefing room, where they don't have anything to say unless they're crying about racism. All their problems stem from racism. I don't know how you could be a member of Congress and crying about damn racism. Obviously, it's not that bad. You made it all the way to Congress. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But, you know, some of these people, they just They just grew up in a way that you got to blame somebody. You got to blame somebody for your problems. They're your problems, but no. There's somebody else did this to you, you poor thing. I don't know. I don't know what it's like. I know what it's like. I go through hard times. If you hooligans didn't notice that, I go through hard times. But man, it ain't really anybody else's fault. It's my fault. It is. Some way, somehow, I know it's my fault. And that, you know what? I use that as motivation to get the hell up and go try and fix my problems. I don't know what it's like to be a victim like that. And then she wants to shit on her staff. If somebody gave her an uppercut, I wouldn't be putting out of shape about it. Everybody needs a little punch in the face every now and then. Just straighten you out. Got to make those punches in the face great again. We're going to read through the chat really quick, and then we'll move on to the next video. Let's see. Oh, Annette, still having problems getting on the site, and I don't understand why. There shouldn't be anything blocking you. I turned the whole security system off. Let's see. Hold on a second. Maybe the changes haven't taken effect yet. We'll see in just a moment. Sam, we create our own destiny. I agree. We don't put all the bumps in the road. Someone else does. And, you know, if you believe in God and stuff, it could be God getting you ready. You need a little adjustment. You're a little bit off the mark. Put a couple bumps in the road. Knock you back over where you're supposed to be. It's not always fun to go through, but, you know, sometimes you got to be more prepared for the job than you realize you're not. So, you know, create our own destiny. I firmly believe that too. Annette, if you can hear me, try it again. Try it again. Because I just refreshed everything, and so it should be up to the new settings. There isn't even, as far as I know, there's nothing capable of preventing you from logging in at this time. Let's see. MU, they love playing the victim card. Yeah. The blue team special. That's what it is. They blame everyone for their problems. They tear their own shit down, and then they kind of sort of cobble it back together, and then they walk around as loud as they can. Look at the great things I've done. Here, get in line. The line starts here. You can start patting me on the back now for the great things I've done. I'm like, wait a minute, you're the one that burnt that shit down. No. They don't ever want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that. That's how it goes. Disco, how's your car situation going? I dropped the Subaru off at the shop yesterday. They were really busy, so they didn't have time to talk to me. But as far as I know, they were supposed to start opening her up yesterday, and at some point in time the next couple days, they're supposed to call me and tell me how the engine swap went, all the parts that they replaced because they're still under warranty from the gold car, and update me on what's going on with the transmission, because I have an all-wheel drive light that just violently flashes at me while I drive down the road. I checked the tire pressure, all the tires match. That's a usual common thing for Subarus to trigger that all-wheel drive light. My tires look fine, which scares the shit out of me because that means that it's probably something wrong with the transmission. So there's a possible transmission switch in the future. I hope not. But they're supposed to call me back and let me know about that, because if it is an issue, we'll just take the transmission out of the gold car and put it in the blue car. I don't know how big this bill is. They said it's going to be more than $1,500 to do all of this stuff, and that's before the transmission and all that stuff. So I won't know until they call me exactly what's happening with the car. I just know I have $1,500+ I will have to pay in order to get it back when